I went to Northwood, by the way.
Did you really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
No
It was
kidding.
great, yeah.
Did you grow up here?
I grew up in Chicago, went to school in Michigan, and then as soon as I finished, Honda called and moved me to California, and I've been out there ever since.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
So you spent time on the sales side of the business?
Well, I actually worked in a dealership going to school, so I worked as a wrench, answered phones, right in service, and then would sell cars here and there, and actually sold cars for like the last little bit of my college career. Go home to the dealership. My folks didn't own it, but I had a really good working relationship with the principal. So I would just go home and work whenever I needed to, and sold cars for a little while on the final approach to graduation. Go home and sell some cars and whatnot in Chicago, and then at Honda. Actually started in customer relations, right, which is always a great experience. The stories are fantastic. Ask me about sometime I'll tell you the story about the NSX owner who, I'll tell you now, he bought a car that had been broken in half and rewelded. Goes back to the dealer to get a power steering problem, and the dealer's like, we're not touching this. He calls us, and we're like, what's the problem? You know, it's only got 12,000 miles. He's like, well, which half of the car should cover the warranty, the front half or the back half?
How did that happen?
Anyways, the car had been broken in half, and the guy got another one and put it.
How does a car break in half?
I mean,
There was a guy in Honda who did it. He was going down a left-hand sweeper, took a hard left, and skidded off the road, and it went sideways into a tree. And they're aluminum, so they're kind of brittle. Yeah, that was a really weird one. But anyways, Honda. Then into product planning at HRA, R&D over there, and then from there into Nissan and Kia and Mitsubishi. Yeah.
Wow.
So that's my story.
Cool. Yeah, I think the sales side of the business, i.e. on the dealer side, that's, I think, you got your ticket punched on that one.
Yeah.
It's good to have.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and I have a really, I always go visit dealers. Usually a couple times a month at my lunch hour, I'll go visit some Kia stores or the auto mall around the corner and just poke my head in there and see what's going on. It's always good to talk with the Kia side anyway. I can go in and chit-chat with them directly about what's happening. But I think it's really important to know what's going on the showroom floor.
Yeah, no doubt about it.
And the customer. And I've been on the side of the desk trying to sell a guy a town car, you know, as a 20-year-old college punk, and I know what it's like to get beat up pretty hard. It's no fun, and you got lights and overhead to pay for and everything. Yeah.
Okay, let's get going here. Want to thank everybody who's already tuned in live. We love being able to offer you a little bit of the inside of what's going on here. We've got Steve Kosowski from Kia. We're going to be talking all about the new Niro, and who knows where the conversation's going to go. We welcome your questions. Shoot us an email. Send it to viewermail@autoline.tv. In fact, we've already got a couple of questions. And we'll take phone calls, too, if you guys care to call in whatsoever. The number is 620-288-6546. Remember, even though this part's live, as soon as it's done, we'll have the recorded version up on our website. We'll have it posted on our YouTube channel. You can always get the audio version, the podcast, at the iTunes store. Just look for Autoline, and of course, it's all for free. We're going to get going in just a moment. Watch Autoline After Hours live at Autoline.tv every Thursday at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. That's 12 p.m. Pacific. You can subscribe to this podcast for free by searching for Autoline in iTunes, Stitcher, or YouTube.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems.
Mr. Vasilash.
John, how are you?
I'm doing great.
Good.
Hey, that was a great show last week with 92-year-old Floyd Vasilash.
Yeah, it really was. He's an interesting guy.
Yeah, we got a lot of great feedback on that show.
And it's amazing, this industry. I was at a automotive steel conference yesterday. 1,500 people.
Unbelievable.
It was crazy.
Just talking about steel.
Just talking about steel all day long, talking about steel, welding steel, forming steel, using a laser steel. We have a car here that's made out of steel. I mean, it's amazing. But I mean, to see the enthusiasm in this industry about something that, we just sort of take for granted.
It's been around for almost 100 years.
Yeah. I mean, it's just wild.
Okay, we got to let everybody know that Christie Schweinsberg from Ward's Auto is also joining us for today's show. Christie, great having you here.
Thank you for having me, John. Great
How
to
do
be
you
here.
feel about steel?
Oh, I love it.
There you go.
Yeah, couldn't live without it.
That's great. But we've got to let everyone know, too, that we've got Steve Kosowski here with us. He's the National Manager for Strategic and Business Intelligence at Kia Motors America. Steve, welcome to the show.
Thanks, John.
And I see we've got a Kia Niro in the studio with us, too, which was what Gary was alluding to, that
Yes.
we've got a car made out of steel.
53% advanced high strength steel.
You read that, yes.
I did.
That's right.
Yeah, it's all,
Yes. 53% high-strength steel. What is also cool about the car is it has an aluminum hood and aluminum tailgate, and it's part of a whole mass reduction strategy we've implemented on the Niro. When we created the car, fuel economy was so important on that car. So there's a lot of ways. You have mass reduction, you have thermal efficiency, you have aero, road load, tire drag, things like that. But the structure of the car is about 53% high-strength steel, and then lots of bits and pieces. Some chassis components are made of aluminum. The bumper beams are made of aluminum. So the whole mass reduction story is really important part of the car.
So you guys started with a clean sheet. I mean, this is an all-new platform.
This is an all-new eco car platform. It's
And explain that eco car platform, because I think that's an important part of the story.
Yeah, good point, John. So the origin of the car goes back to about 2011, 2012, and the directive from our leadership was to create a Kia eco car. And the bits and pieces in place related to the powertrain, the battery, and a lot of other elements. But one of the things that's key is the architecture of the car. It's not derived from another car in the lineup. It's not an iteration of another car. The platform was designed and engineered from the beginning to accommodate batteries in different sizes, to accommodate hybrid powertrains, EV powertrains, and so forth. So all of those, all the engineering work that went into the architecture of the car, the rails, the floor pans, all that, the structure of the car, originates from having to accommodate these different powertrains.
Yeah, I mean, it sort of surprised me. I thought, the size of it is about the size of a Forte, perhaps. And, to learn that you guys said, no, we're gonna start from the ground up and build this.
Right, and so that's a key point, though. But the car is sold in global markets. It's sold in North America, it's sold in Europe, and it's sold in Asia. So that, from the beginning, sort of defines the footprint and the shadow of the car. And the C-segment car, be it a utility vehicle or a sedan, is the most popular vehicle around the world, roughly speaking, in terms of volumes. So that sort of defines the size of the car. And then from there, you have manufacturing constraints, a lot of other different things. But yeah, it's sort of coincidental that the wheelbase is 2700 or 106.3, which is really a common wheelbase in C-segment cars. Same as Forte and Civic and Sentra and a lot of other cars that are in that space. The track width is a little wider than a Forte. The overall length is a little bit different. So, but the general shadow of the car is about the size of a Forte. But the platform architecture and a lot of other bits and pieces and components are completely unique to the eco car platform.
So I know you share this platform with Hyundai. How did you get the crossover and they got the car?
That's a very
to know that story.
Yeah, that's a very good story. So again, back to 2011, 2012, the conversation was about the Kia Eco car. What should it be? And the code name for the car is DE, which is Dedicated Eco. And invariably, in these programs, there's a lot of sharing between the Hyundai brand and the Kia brand. They're all in the same family. And we really, from the beginning of the program, did not want to do another Prius, an Insight, Ioniq, a Leaf, a Volt, that whole sweeping, fast aero camback shape. We did not want to do that. And
was that based on customer feedback?
that is a combination of customer feedback. I'll tell you about that in a second. And also, we wanted to be distinct within the marketplace. Kia has some CUV, SUV heritage. We think there's some merit in that. And we really sensed that there was this secular change in demand toward utility vehicles out of cars. And this is back in 2011, 2012. And we really pushed and pushed and pushed. There was a key meeting we had in early 2012 with our leadership in Korea, where we basically got the whiteboard out and said, guys, vertical line is fuel economy. The horizontal line is going from sedan to utilities. There's this big wad of highly fuel-efficient cars over here, and there's not much up here. We think there's a great opportunity for a highly fuel-efficient utility vehicle. Enough, we want to go here. This is where we want to go. And, you know, roughed out the basic dimensions and who we thought the key competitors were, and that directive became the origin of this car. And it's worked out wonderfully. And it's interesting, when you do consumer research, when we did research back then and you do it now, when you do focus groups, you'll hear a lot of resistance to the wedgy, super aero shape. I don't want that car. I don't want to look like that. Can't I just get 50 miles per gallon, carry my stuff, my bikes, my dogs and whatnot, and feel good driving the car and look cool driving? I don't make a statement. And we think we made the right decision. Yeah, we're pretty confident in that.
Yeah. You've also taken a very different approach with your hybrid then, right? You know, it shares the same powertrain with the Ioniq, does it?
That's right.
So no CVT.
No CVT.
You guys have gone with the DCT
That's right.
transmission instead.
That's
so
right.
go into a little bit of the thinking on that, because I got to tell you, I think you're going in the right direction.
Thank you very much. So one of the things, a couple things drove that decision. One is efficiency. So the DCT is innately, 5, 6, 7% more efficient than like a planetary automatic. That was one, but it feels different. And if you were to just step back and say, what are some keywords that apply to us eCVT? Mushy, sloppy, soupy. And if you look at a DCT, it's crisp, engaged, sporty. And one of the things we also...
But bad launch.
Well, it takes some very careful software and tuning to get
Right.
that right. But the launch also is enhanced with the electric motor. So that's...
Well, that's what I'm getting at. You
Yeah.
sort of, I've driven, you know, the Ioniq, and that's what so much impressed me about the car, is even though CVTs are making great progress, they still have issues, let's
That's
put
right.
it that way. The approach that you guys have taken does not have that mushiness, and you don't have the launch problems with the DCT.
That's right. Yeah. So you take the torque converter out, and then on a normal car without a torque converter, you got nothing until it comes on cam, so to speak, right? But with the electric motor there, you have instant torque from 0 RPM. So that fills in where you don't have the displacement or the torque converter to provide the torque down low. So that really works well.
Yeah.
So you're talking about doing consumer research for this vehicle. Now, you guys have the Sorento, you have the Sportage, which are more conventional crossovers than this vehicle. So what is the demographic, psychographic, whatever graphic that is interested in this vehicle?
So what we're getting is, right now, I can tell you the demos, it's about a 52-year-old male making between $80,000 and $100,000 a year. Those are the fundamentals. What they're trading in typically are Soul, Sorento, Sportage, Forte, and Optima. Those are the top 5 cars that are coming in. That's about 40% of the demand for the car. The other 60% is Conquest, and guess what the #1 non-Kia trade is?
Prius?
Prius. Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
But is
Why?
that because there's so many Priuses?
That may be part of it. There's also some aversion to the new Prius, you could put it that way. And it's interesting, when I go to mykiaforums.com and just read what people are saying about this, there's lots of wonderful threads and discussions in there, but one of them is Niro versus Prius. And it's interesting to read through there and see what folks are saying, and a lot of it is, there's a couple things. One is, here's a typical discussion. I had a 2004 Prius, liked it. I got a 2010 Prius, liked it. I saw the new car. I really don't like the design. And beyond that, they lowered the hip point. The car handles better, but getting in and out is more difficult. The Niro is, about 2 inches higher than a typical C car. So not only is it higher than a typical C car, it's higher than an Ioniq, but it's also way higher than it is in a Prius. And that's good for ingress and egress. Plus, it has a certain aesthetic that looks and feels quite different from a Prius.
Yeah, no, again, I think you guys have gone the right approach of making it more mainstream from a styling standpoint. I think you open it up to many more people in the market.
We think so. It was designed in our Irvine studio. The guys who did it, Joey Moe and Mike Torpy. Mike Torpy did the Soul. So both of those guys have such a good, so talented on the shapes and the forms and the proportions that make the car look and feel crossover-like, and the surfacing is very crisp and robust. You look at the bumper forms, and it's interesting when you overlay this car with an Ioniq, and you look at how short the front overhang is and how short the rear overhang is, and how consumers read that, and it just makes it look a lot more crossover, CUV-like, and rugged and tough. Yeah.
Do you consider the RAV4 hybrid to be a competitor, or is that a little bit bigger than
The RAV4 hybrid's bigger in overall length, but it rides on a shorter wheelbase. So we have almost a 2-inch longer wheelbase than it, but it's a good 8 or 9 inches longer in overall length. But if you look at the cross-shopping, yeah, it's definitely in there. Less about the hybrid RAV4, but more about the RAV4 in general. But yeah,
Right.
I was going to say, but those cars, the CR-V, the RAV4, they get cross-shopped against everything.
right?
We got a question here that just came in from one of our viewers. Dan Berry says, Hyundai and Kia plan to roll out small electric sport utility vehicles based on an existing platform in 2018, said Lee Ki-sang, who leads Hyundai Kia's green car operations. Range will be over 300 kilometers. He wants to know, is the Niro electric one of those?
We haven't said anything publicly, but I'm curious if y'all were the product planners for such a vehicle, how would you configure something like that? What do y'all think?
Well, yeah, absolutely. I mean, I would do an electric, a hybrid, and a plug-in hybrid all off the same platform and save some money.
That's an interesting thought, John.
Yeah, it is curious.
Good
with the
question, Dan.
It's curious with the popularity of crossovers that there aren't more
Yes.
electrified. Does that surprise you?
Yes. It does surprise me, and I'm personally just a big proponent of electrified utility. It makes so much sense, be it a hybrid, a plug-in hybrid, or an EV, for a variety of reasons. The can height of the body allows you to package the battery under there. That's one, which innately helps the CG of the vehicle because that weight is down low.
Right.
The utility aspect of the vehicle allows you to charge a premium, which covers your cost and your material cost of the car.
Well, there's also a curious lack of minivans that are electrified. And,
This is true.
And you guys have an attractive minivan.
This is true. This is true. I have to keep an eye on Town and Country Hybrid and see how they do with that.
Yeah, we do.
Pacifica.
I'm sorry, Pacifica.
We got to take a quick break right now. We're going to come back. We're going to talk a lot more about Kia and the Niro, but we got to give a shout out to our friends at Lear who helped make this show possible.
Lear Connexus offers a parental controls application with geofencing that sends notifications regarding driving behavior and location, including curfew alerts, acceleration alerts, and speed alerts. All delivered to a smartphone application that includes vehicle location, driver notifications, and a report card of driving history, including notifications when predefined geographic boundaries are crossed. For more information, visit Lear.com.
Okay, we're back talking about the Kia Niro. It's Steve Kosowski here from Kia. And one thing I've noticed in the television advertising, no mention that it's a hybrid. Now there's one very quick shot where it shows the eco badge that says hybrid, but no mention of it. Are you involved in any of that decision of how it gets marketed? I mean, I personally, I think it's very intelligent just to say, hey, here's a cool crossover and it gets 50 miles to the gallon, and never mention that it's a hybrid.
Well, first, the marketing folks have done just a wonderful job. The Super Bowl ad with Melissa McCarthy was #1. So
Hilarious.
It was hilarious, and we're really proud of it. And I think we really wanted to sell the attributes of the vehicle. It looks great, it carries your stuff. And we heard this from consumers that, again, it looks great, it carries stuff, it gets great fuel efficiency, it drives wonderfully, and it happens to be a hybrid. And I think part of that messaging got into the marketing and promotion of the vehicle.
So, you were mentioning that the Conquest cross-shopping Prius owners. Is it for a car like this that you no longer have to convince people to get a hybrid if they've already owned a hybrid?
Maybe. I think there's a lot of truth to that in the sense that the hybrid vehicle owner is already comfortable with the technology, and they get it. So there's probably something to that. Yeah. Yeah.
Rory Senna just wrote in to say, why didn't you bring diesels to the U.S. or even a diesel hybrid? I'd buy one in a heartbeat.
Diesel hybrid, yes. Very, very efficient, but also very, very expensive. Really expensive. And diesels, you know, the industry is going through a lot of scrutiny right now. We've looked at it again and again and again, probably since I've been with the company. We've had numerous different diesel projects and studies and analysis. And I think there's always the right balance of trade-offs between cost and fuel efficiency and emissions and market appetite. And, you know, every month we get the data, the Polk data, and look at, you know, how are diesel sales and how are things working. It's still a relatively small chunk of the market. And, you know, when you contrast that with what other alternative powertrains exist and what other technologies exist to improve fuel economy, reduce GHG. It's really tough sometimes to make the argument for diesels. I'm a fan of diesels. I love the torque, and they really work in some applications quite well. And we're not opposed to it, but we just need to find the right product and the right balance and the right compromises to get it through. Yeah, and then, you know, again, working with the EPA and the regulators to get that certified. Right now, just to get a car homologated takes a long time, and diesels are even longer now. There's a lot of scrutiny, so it's.
When you guys were developing this car, and you said earlier that this is a car for global market, were there certain things that you, as someone, you know, based in California, was interested in having that you had to push for to get into this car?
I think there were a certain number of pillars or fundamentals that we all rallied around. Of course, the design and the aesthetic. It had to read and communicate crossover and utility vehicle. That was one. The driving dynamics and the package, I think, were some other elements of this. But I think, you know, we believe people buy the car with their eyes first. So the aesthetic, the look and feel really needed to communicate this crossover utility feeling. And then speaking of feelings was the driving feel of the car. Again, we keep going back to how an eCVT feels, and we wanted this car to feel really, really different from that. And then above all was the fuel economy. You know, the getting a car like this to achieve 50 miles per gallon or more is tough, and that gets to a negotiation, a compromise, a working conversation with the engineers and finance about content and timing and this, that, and the other things. So, you know, those are probably the 3 or 4 passion points: the utility, the design, the fuel economy, and the driving feel. Yeah.
How many of these do you think you'll be able to sell this year in the United States?
Right now, we're pacing at about 3,000 a month, so we're looking at about 36,000 a year. We want to sell more. All the dealers I've talked with about what do you need, what do you don't need, you know, this color, this trim, they just send me more cars. I need more cars. And it's an interesting feeling because we'll look at the days to turn on this car, and it's really quick. And you'll talk to dealers. Early on, some dealers were like, it comes off the truck, we peel the wrap off, and here's the keys, next. So it's really, they really need more. So my point is, we're on pace for about 36,000. We can probably sell more if we can get more. Yeah.
So is this, I mean, to put this into some sort of context, okay, when you brought the Soul for the first time, I mean, how did that sell compared to how this is doing?
That was the same way, and it's a really interesting feeling because I'll never forget, that car came out when we were almost at the trough, almost about 10 million units, and that was a time where we hadn't quite started the factory in Georgia. We were still selling some old product, and you know, we were scrapping it out with the rest of the industry at the time, trying to sell cars, and we knew there was a lot of great product in the pipeline. But I'll never forget talking with the distribution folks who were saying these things are flying out of the ports. The dealers want as many Souls as they can get. Those are the things that are moving out of the ports as quickly as possible. And we originally planned that car at a much lower volume, and then immediately had to start putting plans together. Okay, what's the real upside potential for the Soul? Instead of 30,000 a year, what about 60 or 100? And it was a really good feeling.
Do you think this is going to be analogous to that?
I don't know if it'll quite go to 100, but you know, the appetite in the market for utility vehicles is so strong. I mean, every month we look at the sales numbers, and you look at the compact car moving down and the entry and subcompact utilities moving up. And you know, we're convinced it's a secular change. And I think there's upside potential for the Niro. Just exactly how high, I'm not really sure. Yeah.
Okay, we got a couple more questions here. Jeremy Park says, and I don't know what this means at all. He says, have they mentioned the unobstructed rear window? Does that mean anything to you?
I might conclude that he's talking about the quarter glass or the backlight of the car. If he's talking of that, then, well, we're appreciative of the comment because...
Okay, and Joe Laszlo says, is there any suspension hardware or tuning that gives the Niro any off-road credentials?
Well, off-roading in utility vehicles, CUVs, is always sort of an interesting...
I mean, this is a passenger.
It's a passenger vehicle.
Right.
It has a higher ride height and a higher ground clearance, so for sure. But in terms of like off-roading, like different damping...
Not taking this to Moab.
No, probably
this is not going to do the Rubicon Trail.
No, I don't think so. And the short answer is it's really been tuned for the street.
Yeah.
So.
The thing I mentioned earlier that I actually drove a Niro to the studio today, and I mean, I was very surprised driving down 275, going speed limit, and how it kicked into EV.
Yeah, isn't that cool?
I mean, it was phenomenal to be going 70 miles an hour and then looking down at the gauge and see that it's EV. I mean,
it's really cool.
Doesn't happen very often in hybrid vehicles.
Especially that speed, too.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's really cool. And, our whole powertrain system in this car just operates so completely differently from an eCVT unit that's in, Fusion or Prius or something like that. So if the battery state of charge is sufficient, you can be driving along and, you'll see the little EV light come on. And, it's constantly blending the engine in and out. And this is, we were talking earlier about the DCT and all the software management to get that right. Because the software wants to prioritize electromotive force. It wants to use that motor, not the engine. So if the battery state of charge is sufficient, it's going to shut the engine down. But as soon as you put your foot into it, it'll restart that. So blending that engine and clutch and motor and DCT and finding the right gear right now is just, I have to hand it to the engineers. They should be like bad magicians because it's really amazing what they've done.
Great.
Can you talk about your interior concept for the vehicle, how you made a green, or did you make a green interior?
So it's not as green as the Soul EV with a sugarcane-based bioplastics, and it doesn't use the volcanic ash that's in, or the volcanic materials that are in
the ionic.
the ionic, right? But it doesn't. So to answer your question, it doesn't have the green or low carbon materials that are in the Soul EV. But the interior theme was really designed around a utility function in terms of space and packaging and the ability to put a bicycle. I can put my bicycle in there without taking the wheel off. But it's got a little bit of a driver cockpit feel in the way that the center stack is shaped, and it's sort of a horizontal plane to the top half of the IP. Yeah.
Got another question here that came in from Christopher Wolf, who asks, just curious if you'll ever make an all-wheel drive version to compete with all the Subarus here in Colorado.
Well, that's a thing, isn't it? The all-wheel drive has come up all throughout the program, and the short answer is TBD. Stay tuned. It's probably not likely for a couple reasons. One, a mechanical all-wheel drive system in the car would take away from the whole intent of the car. You're adding a lot of cost and weight, the rear diff, the prop shaft, a different floor, a transfer case, all of that, and it's going to consume fuel. It's going to eat into fuel economy. The all-wheel drive would be an interesting option, but that's also a fair amount of tear up into a program that's already in place. And but the other part of it is this car, because it has the clearance. It's interesting when you talk about, well, why do you really need all-wheel drive? Okay, I get that there's certain circumstances, off-roading and snowy conditions, but oftentimes it's the tread width and it's the ground clearance that really gets you through. There's a fellow in the office who talks about going 4x4ing, way back in years ago, and there was a fellow who had a small pickup with the narrow, skinny tires that come on it, and he was able to go through a lot of stuff that the other guys couldn't because the footprint was so big. Now, on this car, we've taken it up into the mountains without chains, and literally before it was badged, the fellow at the ranger or the officer at the base of the highway before you go up would ask about all-wheel drive. And one of our engineers said, yeah, it's an Outback, of course. And
Just going up to Tahoe?
just going up, and went up there and had no trouble with it. And the short answer was for a couple of reasons. One, it had the ground clearance. And two, it's also about throttle modulation. And so because of the torque down low and the linearity of the power delivery, you don't really need it for most of your driving instances. You know, full disclosure, yeah, it's a thing. A lot of people are asking for it. A lot of people want it. All-wheel drive, big trend in the marketplace. But functionally, you can probably do just fine without it. Yeah.
Okay, they just sent me a message from the control room. We got a phone call that came in. Let's take that,
Okay.
and then we're going to have to wrap up.
Yeah, I'm actually looking to buy a Niro right now. I was actually looking to buy the Ioniq, but I didn't know the Niro was out. And I'm actually looking like right now because we're moving to Arizona, and I need a car. And I'm curious as to why the Hyundai has a lifetime warranty on the battery and the Kia does not on the Niro. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for the question. Be careful with your answer. You might have a sale here if you do it right.
Well, thank you for the interest in the car. We hope you buy one. If it was my call, I would get the launch edition personally. I think it looks the best. A little bit different wheel, tire, color combination. But so our car's powertrain is warranted for 10 years or 100,000 miles. And, you know, the fact is Hyundai Motor America is a different company. They have some traction in the marketplace with lifetime warranties on other vehicles, on other batteries, on other hybrids, so they elected to put that warranty in place. We're very confident in the powertrain and the battery and the durability, but we're very comfortable with a 10-year, 100,000-mile warranty. And, you know, to be fair, the battery between the Ioniq and the Niro is essentially the same, 1.56 kilowatt-hour lithium-ion.
Yeah, very good. Steve, I'm afraid we're going to have to wrap this up.
That was quick.
I told you it would go fast,
Yeah.
but you know, it's always going fast when you're having fun.
Yeah.
So thanks so much for coming in. Great to have the Niro here in the studio with us, but great
Thank you.
discussion.
Thank you, John. Great to be here. Gary, Christine.
Steve.
Yeah, it was really great to be here. Thanks.
Okay, we're going to take a very quick break. We're coming back. We got a lot more to talk with. Dr. Data is going to make an appearance here too.
Okay, I guess that's it.
But I hope we helped make a sale here.
Could have gotten one. Yeah, absolutely. The guy calling up, that's a little unusual. For, you know, I'm in the market right now and I want to buy one.
That's right. Hopefully he made a U-turn and went back to the Kia dealer. Okay, it's that time of the show for the drum roll because it's time for Dr. Data.
Okay, so this is actually going to be somewhat thematic. So
Do you know how this works,
Yes, I
Dr.
do.
Data? Okay,
Yep.
we didn't
Yes.
know if we had to explain it
This
or
isn't
not.
my first rodeo.
that's right. So Carmen, please bring up the first slide. Okay, 38,000. The year's 2015. What could have that been?
And we're seeing a bunch of traffic in the background,
You are.
like some exhaust smoke. I'm gonna take a stab at this. This is how many people prematurely died from pollution from cars.
You are right. I'm surprised. Well, actually, it's from excess diesel emissions.
Okay.
Oh.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I was surprised. So there was a study that was published this week in Nature magazine, and so according to them, on-road diesels produce approximately 20% of emissions of nitrogen oxide that are created by people, and they're precursors to the PM 2.5 particles, those nasty little
Bad
things
stuff.
in ozone. But what was interesting, and a number of other publications had picked this up, but what they seemed to indicate was, you know, that they were saying, oh, gee, it's cars. But basically what this study said is heavy-duty vehicles are the dominant contributor to excess diesel NOx emissions and associated health impacts. And
Like Class 8 trucks?
like big trucks, yeah,
Okay.
on-road heavy-duty diesel
Including
vehicles.
locomotives and ships and all that.
Well, no, they were basically talking
about trucks
motor
or
vehicles, yeah. And so basically they were saying that if Euro 6 regulations were applied, that would caused that to go way down. And but it was interesting that the excess emissions totaled 4.6 million tons.
Wow.
Pretty startling. But,
Yeah.
so.
And wasn't there also a connection with the testing that's been done is not sufficient?
Well, they were saying that basically the lab testing in real world testing
In Europe.
are
It's a joke.
So-
It's a total joke.
so far away from one another, and this is
Yeah,
basically
no, I mean, this is why Volkswagen was able to fix its diesels in Europe and cannot fix their 2-liter, the first-gen 2-liter diesels in the United States, because the European standards are crazy. And even though they've tightened them up, and now they're going to do a whole lot more on-road testing, because that's where the real differences come between you put it on in the lab and it looks great, you drive it on the road, not so good. The regulations allow, this is perfectly legal, for you to emit 2.1 times more emissions than the rules require you to meet in the lab. So this is what I don't get about Europe. In the US, diesels have to meet the exact same emission standards as gasoline engines. And our testing may not be the perfect, but it's relatively correlated to driving on the road. For most people, it does correlate well. Why doesn't Europe just mandate our standards?
Well, it's interesting. So this week, Volkswagen seemed to have settled with the 3-liter engine. So you're talking about the 2-liter diesel. Now it was the
But the
3-liter.
V6 is okay.
So the bigger ones. And but it's interesting, in the release that Volkswagen put out about this, to your point exactly, regulations governing NOx emission limits for vehicles in the United States are much stricter than those in other parts of the world, and the engine variants also differ significantly. Here's the kicker. This makes the development of technical solutions in the United States more challenging than in Europe and other parts of the world. So,
Yeah, look, I've been saying this all along. On paper, Euro 6, and what do they call it now, Euro 6B or something like that, look tougher than what we've got. I mean, if you look at the grams that you can emit per kilometer, grams per mile, HCCO, NOx, PM 2.5, PM 10, Europe looks much stricter. But when you look at the testing, it's easy breezy. Anybody can get through on this stuff.
yeah.
So,
In other words, speaking of diesels, before we leave that subject, what do you make of the potential FCA lawsuit that the government may
look,
bring
I
against
think
them?
FCA's in trouble, and I don't think it's just FCA. I think Daimler's next on the list. And I think what these companies have done, I'm just reading between the tea leaves. I haven't talked to anybody at EPA about this. But under certain operating conditions, you can let an engine temporarily exceed the emission limits. So if it's really hot and you got to put more fuel in the engine, if you're pulling a load, if you're going up a grade, you can temporarily allow the limits to be exceeded. But you have to report to the EPA that you've got these devices, the software control that allows it to happen. And FCA did not do that. And it looks like FCA had multiple software devices to allow this to happen and never notified EPA about it. And my guess is, because there's been rumblings that Mercedes-Benz / Daimler is in trouble over this too, that they're not going to be the only ones about it. So it's not a defeat device like Volkswagen had, which was deliberately there to trick the regulators into believing that the engine's clean. They just never reported to the EPA that under these and those and this other operating condition that the diesel will exceed emission standards.
All right, I don't know that I follow. So,
Okay.
Well, I think from FCA's vantage point, they didn't know, because you said it's not a defeat device.
They knew.
Well, they didn't know that they had to.
I don't.
they didn't
it
know they had to
wasn't-
report?
Because it wasn't classified as I mean, they thought that they were within the parameters of what they could do, like you said, to protect the engine in certain operating conditions.
Yeah. My guess is they knew they were skirting the spirit of the law, even if maybe they didn't believe they were breaking the law. But man, I think they're in trouble. Now, some have speculated it could cost them as much as $4.5 billion. I don't see EPA doing that to them. But hey, maybe they'll get them to build a whole lot more charging stations.
But
like
I mean,
they got
but
Volkswagen.
isn't this predicated though that the fine is levied per vehicle sold? So when you just do the math, that's where you come up with that big number?
Yeah, but everything's negotiable, right? So the max fine could be $4.5 billion. My guess is they're not going to pay that much. But I do think they are going to get fined.
And didn't Mercedes come out this week and say that they're not selling diesels in 2018 or 2018 model year?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
And that may be related to what we're talking about here. They probably know they're not going to get certification.
Either that or they just look at the fee for each vehicle sold with a diesel that breaks the law and it adds up too much, and so the profit margin would be very, very small. So
Could be. Meanwhile, General Motors thinks that diesel sales in the U.S. market will double. Now, that includes trucks, but that's worth counting them.
what do you think, Christie?
I'm skeptical.
That it'll double?
Yeah. I mean, it's, well, double from where is the question. I mean,
Let's put it this way. Diesels right now account for 3% of the U.S. market. GM is saying that it could go to 5 or 6%.
I don't know. Every time I drive the Cruise diesel or I'm in a Cruise diesel, I just don't feel like the refinement is there. Not the same. It's not as refined as the Volkswagen products were. So, and VW, Chevy customers, different psychographically, demographically. I wish them luck, but I don't know. I have my doubts.
I would agree with you on the passenger car side. I don't see the public clamoring for it. But on trucks, SUVs, which are a growing part of the market, diesels can be pretty compelling in those applications.
So, okay, so I can see the truck part. I can see, Silverado, F-150, Ram 1500.
Yeah.
What SUV do you see getting one?
Oh, I would
Suburban?
say Suburban, Tahoe, Yukon, Escalade, talking just the GM products. Ford's going to be putting a diesel in the F-150. That's just around the corner. So when you start looking at that and seeing that, the utility and the pickup side of the market continues to grow, I don't know if GM's right or not, but I could see more diesels being sold there.
I'm sort of with you on this one.
Okay, the skeptics rule.
So this was a big week. Speaking of Ford, this whole notion of 10% cut in their North American and Asia Pacific white collar, that sort of surprised me. I mean, it seems to me that Ford has been fairly rigorous post-recession. I don't think that they've added a whole lot of excess people. And, 10% is not a trivial number.
No.
So, I mean, what's going on here?
Well, they've added a lot of engineers in the fields of autonomy and electrification and infotainment. I don't know. Maybe they have added more than, maybe it has added up to 10% more, but those people aren't going to be the ones losing their jobs.
No, they're not going to do it at all.
No.
Look, last week, we know because it got out that the board of directors was having a scheduled meeting, and they scheduled extra time for Ford's CEO, Mark Fields, to brief them on how he was going to accelerate all their plans or make whatever changes is needed to boost their margins to get their stock price going, which is going absolutely nowhere. I see this directly coming out of that meeting, that they've got to announce some amount of headcount. Now, I don't know if Ford really planned this out because it leaked. The Wall Street Journal broke the story. And it first came out they were getting rid of 10% of all their employees. And everybody jumped and looked it up and said, oh, they got 200,000 employees. They're getting rid of 20,000 people. And then the next day, Ford put out a statement saying we're going to get rid of 1,400 people. And so I think, there's this big panic when the 20,000 number comes out. Oh my God, 20,000, blah, blah, blah. And then it's like 1,400. Oh, that's nothing, no big deal.
But does it stop at 1,400 though? I mean, this might just be the first strike.
It could be, but I see this directly coming out of the pressure that Wall Street is putting on the company. And my advice to Ford is tell Wall Street to go to hell, because Wall Street never rewarded the company over the last 5 years when it posted record profits. The stock did nothing. So what makes anybody think that if they go back to record profits, the stock's going to change at all? And it's the same thing for General Motors, which is under even more pressure than Ford. And the reason it is because all the activist investors know that the Ford family controls 40% of the voting stock, and they're never going to get anywhere in trying to take over the company.
So how much of this do you think was predicated on the valuation of Tesla beating Ford?
Well, yeah, this is a huge embarrassment for all the car companies that a company like Tesla, which has never posted a profit for any of the 16 years it's been in business, doubled its debt load in the last year, is burning through cash at an astonishing rate, has a valuation greater than General Motors, which is posting all-time record profits.
But Tesla's the future, and Ford and GM are the past. I think that's the way that Wall Street looks at it.
I think you're right there, Christie, but Wall Street always says, we're not grading you on how you're doing now, it's always about the future. But if you go back 4 years ago, it was pretty obvious GM and Ford were going to lay some serious cash down on the bottom line, and their stock did nothing.
Mm-hmm.
So I was looking in trust me, I know nothing about stock, but the highest price for Ford stock in the last several years was $17.72, and that occurred on July 18th, 2014.
That's about the day Alan Mulally left, right?
Yeah.
Fields took over on July 1st, 2014, and if you look at their stock price, it's been, there's been some ups and downs.
Here's
but
something
it's
else to consider, and I think this is something that Wall Street has not looked at. In fact, I don't even think Ford has done this. One of the ways of measuring the value of a company is its price to earnings ratio. So you look at, for every dollar in earnings, what will the market pay above that for your stock? So for the S&P 500 right now, it's 22 to 1. So for every dollar you put down on an earnings per share, they'll pay you $22 on top of that to buy your stock. Okay, so PE ratio is it. Ford has the highest PE ratio of any car company in the world. Any car company in the world. Their PE ratio is twice that as General Motors. Now, it still sucks. It's half the S&P average, but it's the best in the world. And people go, well, what's Tesla's PE ratio? Tesla does not have a PE ratio because they have no earnings. So you can't have a price to earnings ratio, right? You just have the price part. But I think this is a point that should be made, that you're picking on a company that has the best PE ratio in the world. You never rewarded them whatsoever for posting record profits. Get the hell out of this industry. I mean, go find other industries to invest in. I hate to break the news to you, but the auto industry, you're just never going to reward it. I don't care what it does.
So what do you think the consequences going forward will be for Mark Fields?
He's under enormous pressure. I mean, I heard the rumors last fall that he might get thrown out. I don't believe it for a second, for some of the reasons that I just cited, but the talk is out there that Mark could be on the way out. As I said, I don't buy into this for a second.
What do you think, Christie?
I think he'll stick around. Yeah, it's just a feeling I have. He's relatively young. He's only been on the job 3 years. They do have a lot of great plans for the future. I know Wall Street's very skeptical about those plans about autonomy and mobility, but they're making record profits on trucks and SUVs right now.
It almost seems to me that that part of the business, the sort of the bread and butter, is what's really doing well, and that his turning it into a mobility company, which I certainly agree that they need to look in that direction. I think that may be his Achilles heel in all this.
Well, remember, it's his, but it's also Bill Ford's. I mean, Bill Ford is the one who really set the vision for the company to go after this. So, you can't just plop this all in Mark Fields' lap, and the board went along with all these investments.
But what's Bill's last name?
F-O-R-D.
Yeah, he ain't going anywhere.
I know he's not going anywhere, but this is part of the problem that the auto industry faces. It's very capital intensive, it's cyclical, it takes years to pay off on those investments. I personally think that if they had not made all these investments in mobility and autonomy, everyone would say, yep, same old stupid dump,
Right.
bump on a log Detroit mentality. Instead, GM and Ford, in my opinion, are at the forefront of any car company in this, except maybe Tesla, but it's in a class of its own, being so small. So for the major guys,
Price, no earnings.
yeah, right, right. But I really like what GM and Ford are doing these days. I think it's going to pay off in the long run. I think the activist investors should sell, move on, and visit us again in 10 years.
So speaking of General Motors, so they announced that basically they're going to stop selling cars in India. They're going to still continue to make cars in India, which I thought was sort of interesting because that it is their manufacturing facility in India is an export hub to Mexico and Central and South American markets. That just seemed really wild to me that you would send cars from India to Mexico. I mean, it's just, jeez. South Africa is going away. East Africa is, so what's going on there?
What do you think,
The
Christie?
incredible shrinking General Motors. They've tried, I think they've tried for years in these markets, and they've come to the conclusion that it's not worth it to stay. But it certainly makes their business riskier because they're now, what do they have? They have China, they have the U.S., Canada, Mexico, South America. If the market goes south in these regions, if you had more regions, you could balance the risk.
Because they sold Opel to PSA, so they basically have foregone their European business.
Yeah, I think it's a real risk. At the time that they're pulling out of Europe because they don't see any end to the losses. Ford, on the other hand, has just reported all-time record profits in Europe. That's got to rub them one way. India, everybody perceives India as looking at fantastic growth in the future. They pulled out of Russia, GM did too, from a manufacturing standpoint. They're still selling Chevys there, but Russia's starting to make a bit of a comeback right now, even with all the sanctions and low oil prices. My question is, would today's General Motors have invested in China 20 years ago? With the mindset that they have now, would they go, China, small market, they all ride bicycles, I don't see any value going in there.
Yeah.
And that's the danger I see in GM's strategy. I admire their discipline, I really do, of saying, hey, look, we can't make money here, why waste it? But I also wonder if they're missing opportunity here. Not right now, but in the future.
Yeah. Well, they could always re-enter the market. They could rebadge. They could do a deal with another automaker and rebadge some vehicles as Chevys if they want to get the brand back into these markets. But
one reason why Buick's so successful right now today? Because they invested in Buick 20 years ago. And to say, oh, wow, we'll just go back into the market. Wow. And when you've given everybody else such a big head start, I'm not so sure it's that easy.
It's interesting, what was it, Volvo just announced that they're going to start manufacturing in India.
Yeah.
So, so General Motors will continue to manufacture, they're just not going to sell there.
And the reasoning for not selling was interesting. They said to offer a full line of vehicles, which is what it takes to have a healthy dealership network, just was not going to work. They couldn't see how they could make money with that kind of investment. So it's surprising that they'll continue to manufacture in India. It must be awfully cheap to make cars there and ship them to Mexico.
Yeah, isn't that crazy? I mean, that's just unbelievable.
Because did you guys see, it came out in a Bloomberg story last week, BMW is paying its entry-level workers in Mexico $1.10 an hour. I about threw up when I read that. I couldn't believe it. I can't believe that they paid, that works out to about $2,300 a year.
from a company that could afford to pay a lot more than.
A whole lot more, right.
Speaking of how car companies are doing, so the 17th annual OEM-Supplier Relationship Index came out, and no surprise that Toyota is at the top, as it has been for every year. They've been doing this with the exception of 2 years when Honda beat them. But it's like there's always been Honda and Toyota have been up here, and then you get down to the middle tier of companies, and then you get to the lower tier of companies. And so just as if we have Toyota at 328, that's what they score. Nissan scored 203.
And going down fast.
So you cover the Asians. What do you see going on here?
So Nissan is a very multicultural company, which is not a bad thing. But if you look at the leadership of Honda and Toyota, you still have a lot of Japanese in the top positions. And respect for individuals, respect for others imbues everything that they do. I was actually just at Toyota yesterday at TTC. They've developed this new supplier center, multi-million-dollar supplier center, and the whole thing is like, you guys come in here, you have free reign. Supply, when you come in for a meeting, suppliers, you can go anywhere. We've got workstations for you. You're our partner. You're our friend. Let's look at your parts designs. Let's try to figure out a way that we can both save costs. We'll redesign this, and so there's this spirit of collaboration that exists, I think, at Toyota and Honda that you don't get so much at Nissan. And I don't know. That was my first thought, is that the leadership is a bit more diverse. People from other regions that don't have.
They just put a new guy in charge of purchasing at Nissan North America, and he's Japanese.
Okay, well, maybe things will be changing.
Look, Carlos Ghosn sets the stage or the tone for the whole company, and he has said we're going to have 10% market share, 10% margins. Now, all you troops, go out and make it so. And I think Nissan's playing hardball, just demanding price cuts. Just flat out cut your price. Not your cost. You can do that if you want, but you got to cut the price. Meanwhile, if you look at the ones who are doing well, Toyota and Honda, as you mentioned, and GM, which is rocketing up the charts under the leadership of Steve Kiefer, who I think is terrific what he's doing. And he's doing the very things that you've been talking about, Christie.
Right.
Respect for the individual, from the buyer to the supplier, more collaboration, and especially in how do we take cost out collectively, and supplier, you get to keep a chunk of those savings, so you're motivated to come up with these savings,
right?
And so I think that's what's going on at Nissan. Is they're under the gun right now. We know that their fleet sales are going up tremendously. We know they've got some of the highest incentives going right now. They're beating up their suppliers. I mean, that's the way GM used to be.
So what does this do to, the product? Most people care about the car they buy, the truck they buy, the crossover they buy. They don't necessarily care about what Planning Perspectives Inc. measures and what John Hankey has found this year. They care about, okay, I'm going to buy a car. So what does this mean when I buy a Nissan? Does it mean anything?
It could mean fewer features in vehicles. Suppliers like to give their newest, most innovative products to automakers that they have the best relationships with, the automakers that they know that are going to be, not hammering them. So
I got to say, I really like Nissan's lineup. I think their products are pretty good. Just because you treat your suppliers badly doesn't mean your cars are going to be bad. But where it will show up is Nissan buying the cheapest stuff possible. That may lead to more warranty claims. If there's a warranty problem, and you've just beat me up, and now you call me, and I've got a problem, you got to come help me. And I'm thinking, well, I've got these other customers who treat me very well. I'll come help you when I get done with the guys who treat me well, i.e., maybe you don't jump on a warranty issue or get it resolved as quickly if you're beating up your suppliers. And to your point, Christie, the suppliers you have great relations with will bring their best ideas and their best technology to you first. Then they'll go shop it elsewhere. And that's where these things start to show up. Or what's your thoughts, Gary?
Well, I think that basically if somebody's nice to you, you give them your better technology and you get around to selling it to the other guys later on because, you know, they're interested in price and only price. They're not interested in this collaboration or, you know, how can we work with you and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I think that will end up biting them in the rear end at some point, them being Nissan. I don't know if you're going to see it next year, but, you know, and especially as, you know, the thing that strikes me is that, you know, as we get more electronics and software into vehicles, that these are things that traditional car companies are not all that apt with and comfortable with, and don't have the engineering teams to develop internally, and that they need to go to the outside for that. And all the suppliers, you know, whether it's Delphi or Bosch or Continental or you know, you name it, you know, these companies have seen the writing on the wall a number of years. They've developed the skill set. So, you know, if you know that, gee, I got to go call on Nissan and they're going to come, you know, they're going to beat me up today, versus, oh, I'm going to call on Honda or Toyota or General Motors and they're going to work with me today. How's this going to be? You know what I mean? And I mean, and that technology becomes essential. I mean, it seems to me that, you know, the content of a car with the stuff that isn't mechanical, the stuff that isn't a seat, the stuff that isn't a headliner, the stuff that isn't a, you know, a steel panel, is going to be all the more important. And man,
Nissan already trails the competition on that sector. I mean, HMI, you know, I think they have some of the worst HMI right now in the industry. Small screens, very dated graphics and systems, and so that could be a danger point.
Could be a real problem. So one of the things, a number that really struck me was, and even Honda's got to be shaking its head at this. So one of the areas that they looked at was how do people feel about different subsections of the car body and white chassis, electrical electronics, exterior, interior, powertrain. So in the electrical electronics category, Toyota scores 455, okay? Honda scores 355, okay? There's 100 points between the two top companies. Then you go down to Ford, which is at 290. Our friend Hao Tai-Tang is the purchasing guy over there. GM 274, FCA 228, Nissan 191.
Whoa.
455, 191.
Yeah, so a huge gap. That's what they call statistically significant.
Yeah, so who's going to have the best electronics in their vehicles 2 or 3 years down the road?
Looks like Toyota.
Man, and who's not going to? It's
Jeez.
crazy.
Well, we're getting close to using up our allotted time here. You got any other topic, Gary, that for Christie?
Well, Gary and I both drove the new Honda Odyssey recently. It's in a sector that is shrinking by the day. I understand Nissan just officially made it official that the Quest is gone, but
When did that happen?
this past week.
Really? I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Of course, it was a dud in the market. It never worked.
It was, but you know, every time I get in a minivan, I just think this is the perfect vehicle type. You know, it can't get any better than this. They're just so easy to live with, you know, easy step-in height, really comfortable, lots of gadgetry, and, you know, in the new Odyssey, the seats slide laterally, and then you can push the seat forward as well when it's slid inward, and just a lot of really cool features, and I liked it. What did you think of it?
No, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, it's I mean, I think the minivan is I think it's going to make a comeback thanks to Waymo and working with Pacifica.
Oh, yeah, for ride sharing.
I honestly think that is going to become a vehicle, an architecture for all the reasons that you cited, because you know, it's got the easy ingress, egress. It's got, you know, it's got seats that can move around, so you can get into one of these things, put your child seats in there, and so on and so forth. I mean, and do that sort of thing, and you know. It's one of these things. I mean, you look at what Honda's been doing, you know, for generation over generation over generation. I mean, they've been, you know, right at it, not stinting at all on this, basing it on much of the architecture that the MDX that we've had in the studio, in the Ridgeline architecture that, you know, the pickup which we did the show on. So it's like they refine, okay, and they just make it better and better and better. And you know, I think it's a worthy competitor to the Pacifica, and the Pacifica, I think, just went
Skyrocketed.
yeah, just above
it's
and beyond
awesome.
everybody else.
It is awesome.
So now we got to see what Toyota comes up with and how Kia does, because they're the only ones left, right?
That's right.
Yep.
There's only 4.
Well, Dodge Grand Caravan.
Yeah.
If
Well,
you
I mean,
wanna
but
still
but
count
that's
that,
I mean, but that's
The grand
Yeah.
old
that's a
Caravan.
legacy product. But I mean, so basically Pacifica, Sienna,
Odyssey, and
and
Sedona.
Sedona.
yeah.
Yeah, you know, I was looking at the sales figures for last year. Sedona and Grand Caravan were the only two that increased last. No, I shouldn't say that, because the Odyssey did go up last year by like 6%, but the increases for Sedona and Grand Caravan were like 20 and 25%. So I think that shows that there's a real need still for a value minivan.
A cheap one.
Yes, a cheap minivan.
Because, yeah, the ones that we're all drooling over can be pretty pricey. I mean, you can easily get into a $45,000 minivan, which, just makes my head spin. But as we were just talking about, they're awfully nice.
Yeah,
They
no, they're probably if we made a ratio of pound, size, and cost, that they're probably a great deal.
Yeah. Fuel economy still isn't great, but
Yeah, but there's like pushing a brick through the air. I mean, what do you want?
Well, one way to measure it too is, put 6 or 7 people in it and then look at the amount of fuel burned per passenger mile.
good point.
And all of a sudden they don't look so bad. In fact, they look as good as a Prius almost in that regard. But the other thing about minivans, why they work, I think, is number one, they have a long wheelbase. A, that means they ride better. B, it's a big box. So not only does it have a lot of room, but for a sound system, the bigger the container it's in, the better the sound's going to be. So right off the bat, they're more comfortable and they sound better inside from a music standpoint. So
yeah.
there's just something about that package that works. And I agree, Gary. I think for ride sharing, those things are really going to come alive.
The stigma may go away.
Yeah. What do you think of the sheet metal flourish on the Odyssey? I call it the boomerang on the door.
The lightning bolt.
Well, no, the lightning bolt they've smoothed that out now. This is like a whole new indentation.
I quite honestly think that it is.
Overwrought.
No, it's just.
To me, it's overwrought.
It just seems to me a flourish that they felt that they had to add to the thing
Yeah.
to give it a little bit of style. I think that if you look at that.
There we go. We got the picture up on it. I think that just looks hideous. I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm talking about the whole van. I'm just not a fan of Honda styling. I love the cars.
Yeah.
I don't like the styling.
Yeah, I mean, the Pacifica is just the standard, I think, right now, and I think they fall pretty short of that on style. They did do a nose job, they said. Basically, they had to, for aero reasons, had to carve the nose up a little bit more. So I think it's a little, proportionally, it looks a little off now compared to how it used to look before. But the funniest comment I read this week online, because the vehicle came off embargo this week, so all the reviews were up, somebody said, "Why does it already look like it's been T-boned?" Which was probably not the comment,
that's probably not what
the reaction they were going for.
See, I just, the form language just doesn't work for me.
Yeah.
Just not to my eyes. And they'll go on to sell record amounts of them, so take
Yeah.
my comments with a grain of salt.
They're saying 125 annual volume
That's a
is
nice
what
volume.
they're looking for, which is
That's
a
half
pretty
a
good,
plant.
pretty good volume. Yeah.
Well, guys, we ought to wrap it up here.
All right.
Yeah, but good show, very interesting. I liked having Steve on too. That was good, talking all about the Niro. Christie, thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you, John.
Great having you. And Gary, let's just keep on doing this.
We'll do one next week.
Okay, it's a deal. Want to thank all of you for having tuned in.
Autoline After Hours is brought to you by Bridgestone Tires, your journey, our passion, and by Lear, a global leader in automotive seating and electrical systems.
Visit our website, Autoline.tv, where you can watch us live Thursday afternoons. Get your daily fix with Autoline Daily and in-depth analysis and interviews with Autoline This Week. There's all that and much more at Autoline.tv.
Look like Sandy Monroe with long hair.
Yeah. Interesting what you're saying about that new Toyota purchasing center too, because they did go down in this year's.
Yeah, it's.
But when I talked to Henke about it, one of the reasons he said was, well, remember, they just moved everybody out of California and Kentucky and moved them to Michigan.
Yep.
They're bringing in a lot of new people. And he says, you know, maybe all this movement, all this change, all these new people, they haven't had the chance to drink the Toyota Kool-Aid and get on with the program yet.
Hanky and I argue every year about this. and I keep pointing out to him, I say, look, you look at the delta between them and anybody else, and I don't care that they're going down because they're still well above.
They're still number one.
They're so much higher.
And everybody gets excited about everybody else doing so much better. And I'm like, John, none of them have ever even reached Toyota when it was at its lowest point. You know what I mean? It's just like, so, until that happens, I'm not all excited about this growth that we're seeing in the other companies.
Right. They've hired 50 new people at the purchasing center, is what I was told yesterday. So that's a good chunk of people to get up to speed and get them indoctrinated in the ways, the Toyota way. And it's a very cool place. They also they took me to their collaborative benchmarking center where they have shelves of parts. And right now they're looking at trucks because they're planning future generations of Tundra and Tacoma. And they get these parts from a third-party company in Ypsilanti that keeps 13 years worth of vehicle parts. They phone them up and say, bring us all you got, every driver door of every pickup truck, or something like that. And here they come. And very cool space. They also bought the 1 million mile Tundra. Do you remember this story? No. 2007 Tundra was driven 1 million miles. So they bought it from the guy. And they're tearing it down and looking it over, trying to figure out, what made it.
What'd we do right?
Yeah, what'd we do right? Exactly.
We had
very
Mike
cool.
Swears here.
We got to get him back. Yeah. Although we're going to have to wait because we could get him back now and he wouldn't say anything.
Right.
It's future product.
Lips are sealed.
Well,
right. But
yeah.
As soon as we can, it's time to get Mike back in the show here.
It just seems to me though that they could build the world's best truck. I mean, just bar none, and the F-150 would still beat it. It's just.
Yeah, there's a lot of brand loyalty in pickups. Just like there's a lot of brand loyalty in midsize sedan, and Camry is the beneficiary of that. But I feel the same way. Not that they shouldn't do it, of course. But,
right, but it's
I think GM could catch Honda and Toyota in next year's survey.
I don't.
You could be right.
I just don't see it. I just see these guys. They just go along. And, it's one of those things that I always think that, if Toyota or Honda really wanted to, make the sales race,
Unfair.
Especially, Toyota's got the dough. You could be blowing out Camrys left, right, and center, and
it could.
It'd be like they'd be up here, and Accord would be here, and everybody else would be down there. I just.
Yeah, they've got the financial muscle. They could absolutely do it, but they don't have to.
Right.
Yeah. Going back to Nissan, these crazy edicts from on high, 10% market share. And what did Volkswagen want? 800,000 global sales or something like that? It just causes you to do
crazy things.
Stupid, crazy things. And, you might get the spike initially and then it's all downhill from there. And you never hear of Toyota or Honda saying, we're going to have X percentage market share next year. This is what we're aiming for. And
although Toyota did get it, even though they never publicly stated we're going to be number one, publicly stated, I think internally they decided we're going for number one. And so back in the 2010, probably 2006 to 2010 timeframe, they went on a buildings binge, plants everywhere, everything going, and all of a sudden their quality started to go down. The so-called unintended acceleration thing hit. They were in, by 2012, they were in big trouble. There were even people asking, can Toyota ever recover from this? So they've made mistakes. But that's when they threw out the old guard and Akio Toyota came in.
No, it's just like the reporting last week, was it, when Akio Toya admits a crisis. And basically, if you read Akio's speech, the crisis he'd admitted to was the fact that he didn't think they were doing well enough for their customers. That was the crisis. That it wasn't. So it wasn't like, because it was coincident with the 20% decrease in profits. So everybody just put the two together, like they lost 20% and therefore there's a crisis. No, it had nothing to do with that. It was just like, we lost 20. Oh yeah, we lost it. That's over here. But the real crisis is that we just lost our way in terms of building products that people love and adore, and therefore we're gonna start on compact cars, and we're gonna learn how to do a better job on that.
See, that should set everyone else's hair on fire.
I know.
Because, they're crying that they're only going to make a $16 billion net profit. No one else comes anywhere close to that. I think GM and Volkswagen are at around 10 billion. Toyota's dropping from 19 billion to 16 billion net profit. And by the way, they have a lower PE ratio than Tesla. So, title for the show, what should we call it? Oh, yeah. Well, that's okay.
We've got a Niro.
Steel is good.
I came up with a 2017 Kia Niro, the good-looking hybrid, or I came up with another one I can think of right now.
I just think
What's the other?
we've got a Niro.
I don't get it.
Because the song that's played in the Melissa McCarthy thing is we need a hero.
Oh.
Or you could say we need a Niro.
Not SEO friendly enough, I think.
What kind of fuel economy?
47.
Oh, a hybrid in disguise.
That's not a bad
Is it
I like
similar to the Ram?
the fact that-
Hybrid?
I-
Something in there about how it's the anti-Prius,
I think this is
but we can't steal that.
this
so.
this is
Why?
this is as much a crossover as
But I was trying to use that.
Who used the anti-Prius?
Jack Sportage.
no, if
Oh, you're saying it's not.
it's
in your
not.
eyes,
No, it's a car. It's I mean, it seemed to me that if you look at I thought that this is basically